announced talks with China to build a new assembly plant near Shanghai. And U.S. regulators approving a new version of a drug made by Swiss drug maker Roche that'll treat 3 common types of blood cancers. I'm Tom Busby, CNBC.
So what would you do with an extra $500 a month in your budget? $500. This isn't hypothetical, by the way. This is something you may need to think about very soon if you decide to become a member of Medi-Share. Medi-Share is a way to pay for your health care, and typically it costs $500 less per month for a family versus other health care plans. So seriously, think about this. You could pay off loans, pay down a mortgage, save the money for retirement, donate to charity. That would be a big deal. But you know what? Here's the best thing. Medi-Share works. It has 250,000 members, and it's growing fast. With Medi-Share, not only do you save, you don't have to pay for things you don't believe in either, and that is a beautiful thing too. So here's how you can find out more, and you might actually wind up saving even more than $500 a month. So check into it. Here's the number. Call 844-91-BIBLE. That's 844-91-BIBLE. Now available in Montana. Call 844-91-BIBLE.
NBC News Radio, I'm Tom Roberts. The Senate Republican health care bill is facing opposition from some members of the GOP. Texas Republican Ted Cruz says the measure does not go far enough to lower premiums.
If an insurance company is offering a health insurance plan in a state that is consistent with the Title I mandates, that insurance company can also sell in that state any other plan that consumers desire.
Kentucky Republican Rand Paul says the group is not trying to kill the bill but wants to change it. Utah's Mike Lee and Wisconsin's Ron Johnson also oppose the current bill. President Trump says he has no tape recordings of his conversations with fired FBI Director James Comey. Democratic Senator Ed Markey is slamming the president for teasing the possibility that tapes exist.
And he's just acting like a reality show president. He can't stop. He continues to demean the presidency.
Markey argued that the president made that announcement to distract from the newly released Senate Republican health care bill. Trump announced on Twitter that he didn't make and doesn't have any recordings of talks with Comey. There will be prison time for the man who fired shots inside a popular D.C. pizzeria due to false child trafficking claims. Edgar Welch of North Korea today received a 4-year sentence. Welch fired an assault rifle inside a restaurant last December. At least 4 people are hurt in Alabama after a possible tornado touched down in the Birmingham area this afternoon. Lisa Carter has more.
Dispatchers say the tornado may have hit several homes near the Western Hills Mall in Fairfield. There are reports of destroyed buildings in Fairfield and downed power lines in Birmingham and McAdory.
A Canadian Special Forces sniper is credited with a world record kill shot of more than 2 miles. Military officials confirmed the shot, which killed an ISIS fighter in Iraq last month. The bullet from the soldier's Macmillan TAC-50 rifle took almost 10 seconds to hit its target. The 76ers are taking Washington guard Markelle Fultz with the first pick in the NBA draft. You're listening to the latest from NBC News Radio.
So you missed the healthcare deadline and don't have any form of healthcare? Liberty HealthShare has the answer. Liberty HealthShare offers an affordable healthcare option that allows Americans to enroll any time of the year. Even if you've already enrolled but are not satisfied with your choice, you can switch to Liberty HealthShare today. Liberty HealthShare allows Americans to control, manage, and direct their healthcare by allowing them to choose any doctor or hospital across the country, yet still be in good standing with the Affordable Care Act. So members are exempt from the tax penalty and mandates imposed on those without healthcare insurance, giving you freedom from insurance. Memberships are for individuals, couples, and families, offering a variety of options to best suit an individual's medical needs. If you're a freedom-loving American looking for contract-free health care, then this is for you. For more information on how to enroll any time of the year, call 855-585-4237, 855-585-4237, or visit libertyhealthshare.org to request a free estimate. Not available in Pennsylvania.
KCAA Loma Linda, your CNBC news station, where your business comes first.
Hey, buddy, I heard the drought's moving in, muscling in on your turf. To make matters worse, the man keeps telling you to limit your spigot. That drought is bad news, no fooling. But me and my boys can help. The Water Boys, on the Water Zone, Thursday nights at 6. We'll help you protect your turf and save water. And hey, Don't worry about it. Consider it a gift.
Yeah, Louie, you heard the boss. We gotta listen in at 6 p.m. on Thursday nights.
Okay, Vinny, you got it. The Water Zone, Thursday nights at 6 p.m. I'll tell our lawn it's now protected.
Broadcasting studios of KCAA 1050 AM, 102.3 FM, and 106.5 FM, located in beautiful downtown San Bernardino. Thanks for tuning in to the Water Zone Show. Good afternoon, everyone. I'm Rob Starr, along with Mr. Mike Barron, also known around here as Mikeypedia, and we collectively are known as
the Water Boys.
Good afternoon, everybody that's listening. Hope everybody had a great day. It's beautiful and hot in California.
Pretty warm, pretty warm.
And supposedly going to get hotter next week, they say.
Really?
Yep. Palm Springs was 121 yesterday.
That is getting up there.
Did you hear about the lady in Mojave Desert who she lost her sandals? Don't ask me how. She couldn't find them, and she had to walk a half a mile back to her car, which, again, I don't understand. And she got third-degree burns all over the bottom of her feet.
Well, they are called sandals,
Yes.
and maybe they kind of disappeared into the sand.
She took them off. I mean, that's kind of silly.
But no, I mean, either way, I mean, for whatever reason, to have to walk in that kind of hot sand.
Said it was 160 degrees on the sand.
Sounds like artificial turf temperatures.
Yes, it does.
By the way, I got to tell you something. Speaking of artificial turf, just for a moment, there's an interesting study going on that with this heat, you know, in order to use artificial turf, playing fields, playing surfaces, you've got to cool them down, right?
Right.
And what they're doing is they're figuring out how much water do you have to use to cool down 160 degree Fahrenheit artificial turf down to that 70 or 80 degree playing temperature that would be safe for kids. And how often do you have to do that? So we're going to find out down the road, it's probably several months out, whether in fact cooling artificial turf in hot summer days takes more water than keeping turf green.
Yeah, that's a good idea.
So
that'll be a good test. Well, we're going to bring on our news lady.
Oh, right.
Yes, and she is the purveyor of Maven's Notebook, Miss Chris Austin.
The
Hi,
one
Chris.
and only.
Yeah, hey, good evening, guys. How you doing?
Great, great. How are you?
I'm doing great. I'm up here in Sacramento where it's a few degrees cooler, but a lot more humid, so
and
I don't think I'm doing much better than you.
Well, it's a lot of evapotranspiration going on, though, when it gets hot, don't you think, with all those plants? Our theory here is that with all that turf removal that happened here in Southern California, we're 1 or 2 degrees hotter than we otherwise would be. But I don't have any objective facts to prove that yet.
Well, it's an interesting study about the artificial turf.
Yes.
Watering artificial turf.
Because you got to cool down. Otherwise, you can't use it during the summer. And, of course, you know, it kind of makes sense in cold climates, but here in, you know, summer climates like we have in Southern California.
What about the people who have pets that go out on the grass and burn their little...
Yeah, LADWP got, some citizens got mad because they were watering this little patch of fake grass that they had, and they said, well, that's because the residents come and have their dogs do their business on it, so we have to wash it off.
Yeah.
Makes a lot of sense. Well, up in Sacramento, have you been to any meetings here during the past week that has brought up some interesting information?
Oh, well, today was the big day when the Delta Stewardship Council passed their amendment that supports dual conveyance in the Delta, which the Delta advocates take to mean supporting the Delta tunnels. I'm not sure that the council doesn't support the tunnels, but the amendment just supports the idea that there'll be through Delta conveyance, meaning sending the water through the channels, and then some form of isolated conveyance like a tunnel. So they approved that 5-1. one person wasn't there, and the one person that voted against it was a representative from the Delta. And it was a pretty tense meeting, I have to say. There were it was kind of boisterous.
So this was the biological, is it opinion? What? How did you
describe?
No.
This is for the amendment to the Delta Plan by the Delta Stewardship Council. The Delta Plan is their long-range plan for the Delta, the management of its resources. And so they put in an amendment today that the legislature told them they are to promote options for conveyance in the Delta. So today they passed an amendment. Well, they voted on the amendment to send it to the environmental review process, but they basically have approved this amendment that says that there should be dual conveyance in the Delta. The other thing is that we're waiting for the biological opinions on the tunnels. Those were due out actually on June 9th, and so, we are quite a bit past that date. And I have not heard why. I just know that they haven't been put out yet. Some people may take the delay and say that's because they can't get them approved. They're not willing to sign off on it. But there's also been a lot of talk about the fact that the Trump administration is way behind on appointees for a lot of these federal agencies. And without these appointees in place, things in the federal government are starting to grind to a halt in all these little places. So it could be the science is a problem. It could be the lack of appointees. I just don't know.
Well, I think we should volunteer you to be an appointee because you're very knowledgeable.
Absolutely.
I'm going to write to the administration and recommend you.
And you can request a FISA report. See how fast that goes through the government. Hey, I heard that. No, go ahead.
Oh, go ahead.
No. You were speaking. Go ahead.
Oh, I was going to say that one of the interesting things that happened is the Bureau of Reclamation sort of revised their forecast for Lake Mead on the Colorado River, and where they thought that it was going to be lots of water, maybe now not so much, they say. They're just kind of saying, we anticipated there would be more runoff, but there isn't. And so now it looks like Lake Mead is going to be lower than expected, but still not much above the area or the range where it would trigger that shortage declaration, where Arizona and Nevada would have to stop taking their water.
I heard that they were forecasting the January 1st, 2019 level is now 20 feet lower than it was the last time they forecast that. And I don't know, that's so strange. Maybe the ground is soaking up all that extra moisture because and maybe it's increased evapotranspiration. We have a changing climate. That's true.
I don't know. Don't quote me on this, but there's been a lot of studies that saying that climate change is affecting the Colorado River, and this might be an indication of that.
I heard that the State Water Board invests $4.5 billion in recycled water research.
Yes, they are working to, they're trying to move towards direct potable reuse, which means, that the recycled water would come directly to your tap, not necessarily through an aquifer or through, dumping it in a reservoir and mixing it with other water. And so that's where they're working to take California. We're, several years out. They just said it's feasible. Now they've kind of taken a look at the science, and they've seen where the gaps are in our understanding. And so now they're investing in research to move California to that level.
I know there was some article I read about, I know Mike doesn't like me to use the word that begins with a T, so that kind of water to tap. but they did, can I say it? They said it in the article. They called it the toilet to tap.
If it's good enough for Israel, it's good enough for us.
Well, they said that a lot of people in Orange County, because they're doing it there, it's not having a great effect. I mean, they're not excited about it. A lot of people don't like that idea. And maybe
yeah, they took a bunch of bottled water up to Hollywood Boulevard apparently, and sort of sat out there and tried to encourage people to drink it on this very, very hot day.
Yeah.
And apparently they did not get a lot of takers. So.
Well, I don't know where this is happening, but I think it might be in San Diego at an upcoming water seminar or water conference, and there's going to be a beer company, one of those craft beer exhibits, and all of their beer is brewed with
recycled water,
direct recycled water. Have you heard anything about that?
You know, I have heard that the quality of the water is actually, once it gets processed, it's actually purer than regular water, that you might draw from a river or from somewhere else. I mean, it's really very highly purified water, but there's just kind of this yuck factor.
Yeah, I guess
but Singapore does it.
It needs to do a marketing program, I guess.
Yeah, it's Stone Brewery, and they're making craft beer from that direct recycled water. So there's obviously an ongoing effort to get people exposed to this and get them feeling more comfortable. But I tell you what,
Do you have to tell people that? I mean, you have to notify them or
that's interesting.
Put it on the bottle or something. But.
Oh, I'm sure they do. They're actually trying to promote it as a benefit. They're being good for the environment.
Recycled beer.
Yeah,
essentially.
Taste it again for the first time.
yeah, I like that. That's a good one. We should trademark that.
Actually, it belongs to Kellogg's cornflakes.
Okay.
But anyway.
Hey, so one last thing. So I heard that the California Appeals Court gave a direction about the lawsuit between San Diego and Metropolitan on the rate, and who really won? I think they both
did. It was a win-win.
They both say they won. So, who said there aren't any win-wins in California
there you go.
water?
Right.
So
I think it was a very mixed decision, and each party won some parts of what they were looking for and lost on others, and a bunch of stuff's going back to the trial court. And there's probably going to be an appeal to the Supreme Court, California Supreme Court, on some of the things that the judge upheld.
As long as it doesn't go to that Ninth Circuit, I think we'll be in good shape.
Yeah, we hope. Well, anyway, hey, we appreciate you doing this spot every week, and anybody who wants to support the Maven's Notebook, it's tax deductible, people. So, and she does a great job, and that's where we get all our news from, is her. So we appreciate that.
Chris,
I appreciate it too, and I'll see you there next week.
Yes, you're going to meet me at my office, right?
I will be there.
Excellent.
All right, take care and have a great evening, Chris.
You too. Take care, guys.
Thank you.
We're going to take a little break, and then we'll be back with the special guest that we have, Mr. Seth Siegel, all the way from New York. And stick around. He's great. And we'll be back in one moment.
This is the Schmidt's Yard. Company's coming soon, and, oh, Schmidt, their deck and outdoor furniture's been dominated by dirt. But no worries, there's plenty of time for Scott's Outdoor Cleaner Plus OxyClean to work its magic. Its fast foaming action lifts dirt and wipes out stains from moss, mold, mildew, and algae. Guaranteed. All while being safe to use around plants and grass. Because when company's coming, dirt's not invited. This is a Scott's Yard. Pick up Scott's Outdoor Cleaner this weekend.
Oh, hi, we're back.
I didn't hear the intro music, so.
All right.
I had a little slip. It's hot in the control room.
It's hot out here, too.
Yes, it is.
But, hey, we will make do, and we will move forward.
Yeah. Just so everybody knows, the studio is in a little bit of a disarray if anybody's watching. You really can't see it. You can just see Mike and I with the NBC logos behind us. But we
look cool.
We look cool. We're going to move the studios in a couple weeks to a new location, new equipment, new everything, and fully more air-conditioned. This is a humongous mall that we're in. It's really large, and but there's only like 2 places that are existing in here right now, and we're one of them. And so it gets a little hot in here, and anyway, we're working that issue out. Anyway, we'd like to welcome a gentleman to the show who we've had on before, and his name is Seth Siegel. He's a author, famous author. He's a lawyer. He's an entertainment producer. He's a lecturer. I can go down the list, but most of all, I think he's a great guy, and he knows a lot of stuff. So we want to bring him on. He's the author of Let There Be Water and some other books. So, Seth, welcome back.
Thanks, guys. Great to be back on the show.
I know you've had a long, this is, I think, our 105th show that we've done, and you were on one of our earlier shows, and we really appreciate that. And it was one of the best shows that we've ever done. And I know
I also want to thank you guys. I mean, it's so important that we raise awareness of water and water issues, and you guys should be nominated for some special Peabody Prize for, I'm not kidding, for helping to raise awareness. If we get citizens interested in water the way they are in, Russian involvement in our elections or healthcare or other stuff like that, we can have much better water outcomes. Because our elected officials will start paying attention the way they should.
Well, I've got to tell you that our co-host for our ag part of our show, once a month we focus on agricultural water use, and her name is Ingi Bisconer. She has been president of the California Irrigation Institute, and they have an annual conference, and her opening comments quoted your book, but also in a panel discussion, she asked the panelists why it was that Israeli children, when they sing a song about rain, it's so different than when the words that American kids use about rain, rain, go away, and the Israeli version is completely opposite of that. And so you're right. I hadn't thought about it, but the word is getting out there because there was probably close to 60 people in attendance at that, and they all heard it.
Yeah, well, thank you. I mean, since I was on your show, I've been myself pretty much a man in motion. I've spoken at more than 220 audiences in more than 60 cities, 23 states, and on 4 continents.
Wow.
The book, believe me, whoever thought a book about water would sell more than 10 copies, and I'm me buying 8 of them. But the book became a bestseller in New York Times, LA Times, Washington Post, and a lot of others. And now it's been available in almost 50 countries around the world, and 14 foreign language editions. And so it's a kind of a Cinderella story. And as I think I told you guys last time, every penny of royalties goes to water-based charities, so water-themed charities. So I'm not doing this to hype awareness for my own benefit. I'm doing this to hype awareness for the benefit of all of us.
Yeah. Well, it's just amazing, and I've come and seen you speak a few times, and you're awesome in doing that. Hey,
thank you.
You had recently done an op-ed in the Washington Post, and it was called "Forget the Politics. Iran Has Bigger Problems." Can you kind of tell our audience what that's about?
Sure. And I'm talking to the media right now, so I don't mean in any way to be putting down any part of the media. Sorry, but we do tend to focus on a couple of themes or tropes over and over again in the way we talk, the media talks to us. And sorry. And so when we talk about Iran, very appropriately we talk about Iran fomenting terror, being a state sponsor of terror, money laundering, engaged in all kinds of criminal activities. Their nuclear, sub rosa secret nuclear program in violation of international law. That's what we tend to talk about. But the reality is that Iran actually has a systemic and horrific problem, which is that ever since the Iranian, they call it the Islamic Revolution in 1979, when the Shah was deposed, those of your listeners who are of a certain age will remember that. But in 79, the longtime leader of the country was deposed, and the Muslim clerics, led by a man named Ayatollah Khomeini, took over. And a few years after that, although they may have started with good intentions, they certainly didn't follow up with that, because they handed the keys to the treasury over to a group called the Islamic Revolutionary Guards Corps, which is kind of an internal militia, which now owns as much as 50% of the economy of the country of about 85 million people.
Wow.
And these guys started damming up rivers all over the country. They built 600 dams to date, prior to that, in the whole country, there were 13 dams. They built 600 dams. They start damming rivers. They start monkeying with the ecosystem of the country. But the reason for these dams was not to provide more water for everyone, but to provide more water for favored farmers and favored tribal groups over others, and help get money, bribery, and whatnot for them from certain individuals for this diverted water. Anyway, here we are, not quite 40 years later, and we find ourselves in a situation where Iran now has severe water problems. The problem's made worse by the fact that the government does not want to get into a fight with farmers. They need the food that the farmers produce. And so they tell farmers, basically, we're going to turn a blind eye if you're going to drill a well. So all the regulatory requirements of drilling wells, we're going to ignore. So farmers have drilled wells willy-nilly all over the country. Fuel, energy is subsidized in Iran. And so farmers turn the pumps on, and they really have no incentive, basically, to turn the pump off. Groundwater resources are enormously depleted, and the rivers are diverted, and lakes have dried up all over the country. One of the huge lakes that I talk about in my article was 2,000 square mile lake of unimaginably large size, and it's now basically 10% of what it was 20 years ago. So you have one crisis after the next being created by the fact that the water is being turned off in the country. And if I can get to the punchline of the story, a former government minister, the former agriculture minister, issued a report recently that I was able to get a copy of and get translated from Farsi into English. And what it says is that water mismanagement, water mismanagement and corruption have been so terrible that it is now at risk of as I mentioned, 85 million people in the country, that within the next 15 to 20 years, 50 million people may have to be uprooted from their homes and moved to other places to live. So this is really terrible. If I can just grab one more minute, I know it's been a long answer.
No.
Just one more minute. I want to point out to the listeners who are not familiar with my book, Let There Be Water. I tell the story of how Israel has used water as a tool of harmonizing the region and harmonizing the world, and as a tool of what I call hydro diplomacy. And from 1962, very quietly, from 1962 to 1979, I tell the story in my book, never before reported in any publication in any language. Israel from 62 to 79 came into Iran at the invitation of the Shah and kind of rethought the water systems of the country. And when they were forced out in 79 because Israel was seen as bad guys by the religious clerics, they left behind a pretty high-functioning water system. And it's really a tragedy that because of their hatred for Israel, the Iranian government has foisted on their own people a very troubled water future now.
No, that's, as I read your article, I was thinking, how does a policy that in retrospect looks so poor, so bad, so contrary to the benefit and goodwill of the country continue to just be duplicated and just go down the same path year after year after year? Because you're talking about 40 years and there's no intervention, there's no input from the people, or if it is, it's ignored, and the autocratic decisions that are causing this depletion of aquifers and redirection of rivers just continues to go. And I know looking back, it's not like, oh, well, we didn't intend this to happen, but how does such bad management continue to go on for so many years?
Well, we are blessed that we live in America, so we kind of think that everybody has a system somehow or other akin to what we have here. But, in a large part of the world, when you have an authoritarian or even sometimes a totalitarian government, as is something of the case, authoritarian to be sure, in Iran, the voice of the people really are not heard. And so you have bad ideology, crazy Islamist ideology. You have bad management, and you have massive corruption. And the truth of the matter is that the average person is of no concern to the government. And for those of us who are cynical or angry, whether you're a Democrat or Republican or independent, about our government, and there's plenty of reasons to be upset. I mean, there's plenty of things we do wrong. At least every couple of years we get the opportunity to vote the rascals out if they're not doing what we need them to do.
Yeah.
In Iran, there's no constraint like that. So what the powers that be want to do is they want to keep this Islamic Revolutionary Guard Corps happy, and you keep them happy by continuing to let the flow of money go in their pockets. And one of the ways they are kept rich is by controlling the water of Iran.
How, when I think about the lack of this kind of information ever being presented, when I read your article, I was stunned that this had been going on for 40 plus years and that this had occurred, and really this was the first time I ever read anything about it. How did you discover this? I mean, how did that come about? I mean, I think it's great. You should get a Pulitzer.
It came about. It's such a great, it's such an amazing event. When I was doing the research for Let There Be Water, and again, I'm sorry to repeat some of these things that I may have said the last time around, but I did some very heavy reporting for the book. I interviewed 220 people for the book. And since you guys are in the business of interviewing, you have some scope of what 220 interviews are all about. Mm-hmm. And I did most of them in Israel, so I was flying back and forth there for weeks on end. Some people, because they had such interesting things to tell, I interviewed multiple times. In all, I did almost 800 interviews. And I'm interviewing one fellow who had been a very important professor on a totally unrelated area from Iran. In the 1950s, he was the guy who came up with the idea of drilling in the desert for brackish water and then desalinating it and using it for agriculture. And he really is one of the first great minds to transform Israel from a water-starved country into a very important step forward on water security. And we met in this coffee shop in Jerusalem, and he was quite aged, and he was walking slowly, and he told me the opening moments of our interview that he had just gotten out of the hospital a few weeks earlier suffering from a stroke. And we're talking, and I asked him another question, and he goes, oh, well, that was in the 1960s. He says, I wasn't in Israel then, I was in Iran then. And I paused and I said, Iran? What are you talking about? What do you mean you were in Iran? How could you have been in Iran? He goes, well, of course I was in Iran. And he proceeded to tell me this almost, I'm here to talk about desert water excavation, and for the next maybe hour and a half, I'm scribbling notes, him telling me about he and how hundreds and hundreds of other Israelis were in Iran for almost 20 years, and how they built out the irrigation and water systems of the farm and city of the country. And I was just dumbstruck by it. Anyway, a few weeks later, wow. I read an op-ed for the New York Times, and in it I dropped in a single paragraph where I mentioned that Israel's water program in Iran over this period of time. Well, the New York Times is a fairly well-read publication, and I received about 500 or 600 emails. And what shocked me was the fact that something like two-thirds of them said, can you tell me more about this Iran story? And that's what got me to think that I need to learn even more about it. So I called this guy up again, and we spoke another time or two, and he gave me the names of everyone else who was still alive, who had been with him in Israel in the 60s and early 70s.
Oh,
and I interviewed a whole bunch of very aged men and some women, and got to hear the stories of these people, and the story was just remarkable. Well, when I wrote my book, I was thinking, God, I'd like to write a lot about it, but I just wrote basically a part of one chapter about it under the idea of this hydrodiplomacy concept that I just mentioned to you earlier. So, but it's not just Iran that Israel, did stuff that was, almost cloak and daggerish in water. China had a policy of having no interactions with Israel because they wanted the support of the Islamic Conference and the Arab League at the UN and other places. And the deal they made with them was that they would not have any contact with Israel. But as China's water problems got worse and worse in the 70s and then the 80s, they made a decision to reach out to Israel through intermediaries. Again, another story that has never been written anywhere. And they reached out to Israel. I found the man that they reached out to, and Israel worked out a deal that they sent in teams in secret into China to help them with their water problems. China was so impressed with what they got out of this that they ultimately established diplomatic relations with Israel. And the first person to come into China on a formal public basis was who? Was the leading water scientist of Israel, who came for a one-year stay to train China's water experts. And they put that in the newspapers, and that was the formal declaration that China was breaking its commitment to the Arab League and the Islamic Conference. And the world is a better place for that.
So you think, because Israel does support some of their enemies, I guess is the better word to use here, or maybe it's not the right word, but they hold so much to the life of these other countries, because without water, they're not going to exist. And you would think that out of human decency, and maybe that doesn't exist between different countries there, that somebody with some type of wisdom, I can't believe I know people who came from Iran, who's been here in the States for 30 years or 40 years, and they're very nice people. And I just can't imagine that government officials thinking that, hey, you start drilling for water and doing wells, and then you start seeing subsidence and holes and no more water. I mean, eventually they're going to have a serious problem. And the water seems to be a big key, I think, to future relations and making nice with everybody. But I'm not in politics to do that.
Do you think?
Well, I'm sorry, go ahead.
Oh, I was just going to say, following up exactly on what Rob was saying, is do you think that Israel's leadership, technological leadership in water, is creating some of these backdoor, behind-the-scene relationships that are going to be helpful to Israel?
Tell you what, I'll tell you a secret, because I know you only have a couple 100,000 listeners or listening right now.
Only because they knew you were going to be on tonight.
So Israel currently is involved with some 150 countries around the world because of its water program. Now, there are many of these countries do not have diplomatic or commercial relations with Israel. And the way it works is by prior arrangement, Israeli businessmen and businesswomen come to these countries. They fly through a third country, often Turkey or Cyprus. They fly into these countries, and they are taken to a special lounge. Their passports aren't stamped, but they're given entry papers. They do what they have to do, and they build relationships around water with government officials, with people in agriculture, with people in industry. And they come back and they service and sell and train around this on a regular basis. It's quite an exciting story, and this story was shared with me in a way that I'm not. The only condition was I'm not permitted to say the names of the companies that are doing this and the countries that are doing this, but it's a very, very exciting story to realize that this is going on, and at the same time that some of these same countries are saying terrible things about Israel and about America too, at the United Nations and elsewhere. But this backdoor quiet diplomacy is going to start yielding great, great benefits. I will tell you, I am by nature an optimistic guy, but I'm seeing it in current days, how the nations of Africa, which had shunned Israel out of sort of some crazy thinking that the Islamic Conference was going to be nice to them in some way or another, and now their water problems in Africa are getting so terrible that I think I didn't prepare this for the interview, so I don't know exactly, but I believe it's 7 African nations have either established diplomatic relations or are establishing diplomatic relations with Israel right now, and the big driver for that is getting access to water technologies. And so this is very much playing a part. I can tell you also that I'm not allowed to say the name of the country, but a very prominent Arab Gulf state has reached out to me and asked me to be involved with them to help them understand better what Israel has done, so they can do more of that in their country.
Wow.
So I'm telling you, I mean, I don't want to say that the Messiah is about to come, and that we're at the end of days and that, peace will reign for all eternity now. But boy, I want to tell you, I think that we're going to see a kind of a realignment in the next couple of years that I suspect most of us a year or two ago would never have imagined possible. And as I was doing research for this book, I became, which now is out, Let There Be Water, I became ever more enthused over the realization that something good is going to happen. Some of your listeners may be on Twitter, and I tweet every day, several times a day, about water issues and frequently about Middle East issues. I'm at Seth, S-E-T-H-M like Mary, Siegel, S-I-E-G-E-L. And those who follow me on Twitter will realize that I have pretty much predicted accurately some initiatives between Arab states and Islamic states and prior antagonists of Israel, so that we see that water can be a pathway to peace. We know that water can be a source of conflict, but it's pretty exciting also to see that water can be a source of conflict resolution.
Yep. Well, we're going to take a little break. If you can stick around, we want to get back to stuff that's happening here in the United States, and so stick around just for a minute, and we'll be right back.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
Do you hear it? Springtime! And folks across the country are excited to get their yards ready so they can get outside and kick back again. And with Scotts and Miracle-Gro in your shed, it's easy. Whether you plan to grow spectacular plants and bountiful flowers, or enjoy a thick, healthy lawn all season long, now's the time to get outside and fill... Oh, wait. Do you hear that? The sound of great things to come. It's time to fill your shed with Scotts and Miracle-Gro.
Well, welcome back to the Water Zone, and with Mike and Robin and our special guest, Mr. Seth Siegel. Seth, I'm going to kind of bring it back out to the U.S. stuff,
Sure.
But Mike had a question he was talking to me about that I think he wants to ask. So,
Seth, with this hydro diplomacy, the dynamic that's occurring between Israel and its richness in water technology and nations in need of that technology, do you see any parallel to any biblical story or perhaps science fiction book or something that you've read? It's just, to me, I don't know, something makes me sense that, not that we've been here before, but that there might be some parallel somewhere.
Independence Day 3.
Well, I'll leave the science fiction and Hollywood stuff to people closer to Hollywood than I am. I'm in New York, so what do I know about that stuff?
Hey, you got Broadway.
But I think, and I don't want to offend any of your listeners by saying that the Bible is or isn't, the inerrant Word of God.
Yeah.
But so I take no position on that. But I have, out of literary and historical and cultural interest, read the Bible a lot, and I think it's actually, if I can just editorialize for one split second,
Sure,
I think
absolutely.
I think it's a terrible thing and a misreading of the separation of church and state that our schools have now driven us away from reading one of the greatest works of classic literature, which is the Bible.
Yeah.
I think it's really a shame that we don't read the Bible. I'm Jewish, but I've learned a lot from the Christian Bible and been inspired by the Christian Bible, and I think that whether you're an atheist or an agnostic or a person of any faith or no faith, the Bible has many, many lessons to share with us. And I think that if you wanted to actually say, does the Bible, have any lessons for modern days? I think all throughout the Bible there are, I tell Let There Be Water, my book, that the Bible is a water-infused document. The word water appears 600 separate times in the Bible, in the Hebrew Bible.
Wow.
600 separate times, and that's not including the number of times there were clouds or rain or mist or fog or words like that appear. So that if you add all of them up, this is the category of water. In fact, the Bible even has a word, like Eskimos have many words for snow. The Bible has one word for the first rain of the season, and another word in Hebrew, of course, for the last rain of the season, Yoreh and Malkosh. And so it's a very sophisticated document about rain, and if those people who'd be interested in learning about water would do well to realize that human civilization have been through droughts and water scarcity on many occasions, and those countries and civilizations that prepare well for it will do okay. And we see Joseph. I was not expecting this question, by the way, so I actually did prepare for this.
But you stimulate. Your story just stimulated that thinking.
But Joseph. After he's freed from prison, he becomes the basically the number one advisor to the Pharaoh. He has this dream that there's going to. He interprets the Pharaoh's dream that there's going to be 7 years of drought coming after 7 years of plenty. So he prepares in the years of plenty for the years of drought. And I also, if I can get a little bit misty-eyed and inspirational, if I can speak of the prophets, Isaiah speaks of a light onto the nations. And I've said this on more than a few occasions, that, Israel is a source, for me at least, of great pride, and I think it does great things on many levels for many people in the region and in the world at large. But I think that as the world grows drier, and I think most of your listeners are aware of the fact that the U.S. government believes that some 60% of the world's landmass and billions of people will be water scarce in the next 5 to 10 years. If that's the case, that Israel has spent the last 70 or 80 years preparing for a water scarce future, and that Israel can share with the world how to, make use of smart irrigation and smart seeds and reuse of sewage and desalination and 100 other technologies, is something that the world will benefit from Israel's trial and error over the past many years. And by the way, didn't catch the name of the woman who was on before me, but she said Israel uses toilet to tap. That's not correct. Israel does not use toilet to tap. But Israel leads the world in the reuse of water. Almost 90% of its sewage is treated and reused, but in a parallel national water infrastructure system where the water is shipped to farms to use it so that fresh water isn't being depleted.
Wow. No, that's great that you pointed it out. And I knew you were going to find a great parallel in your biblical knowledge, and I really appreciate that, because Joseph was despised by his brothers and almost killed and sold into slavery, and here he rose to have the power, become the most powerful man on earth next to the Pharaoh. So,
well, sometimes adversity pays off. Not always, but sometimes it serves a good purpose.
That's right. Well, thank you very much for sharing that with us. I agree with your sentiments and your statements.
So, Seth, why is it becoming dangerous to think of water as a free, limitless resources here, or anywhere?
Yeah. Well, every time I say that, I get jumped on by an audience somewhere. Someone in the audience that's screaming about how I'm ready to have poor people die of thirst. And let me just first.
They must think you're a Republican. I said they must think you're a Republican, because that's what they all say here. They're going to push Grandma over the cliff.
I live in New York City, in the Upper West Side. I don't think there's ever been a Republican in that entire district. I mean, I don't.
That's right.
James Woolsey, who's the former head of the CIA, once said of my neighborhood, I live in the Upper West Side of Manhattan, he once said that there are more Bolsheviks living today in the Upper West Side of Manhattan than were in the Politburo during the time of Stalin.
Oh my gosh!
So I'm not sure, but anyway, I say all the time that it is absolutely absurd that water should be a free good. But I also hasten to add that, of course, we should not let anybody be without water so that they can live their lives. What my point is that in the same way that we provide food stamps or housing allowances for very poor people, if someone is too poor to pay their water bill, we can provide vouchers for them to pay a water bill. But everybody, farmer, municipality, school district, people who are sitting on historic water rights, everybody should be paying for water. Because until we put a price on water, we are not going to value it properly. We're not going to be thinking about substituting technology in lieu of water, and we're going to continue to be squandering it. There's a value, and not to get too wonky, but economics is all about sending price signals from the market, and we, by distorting water, by giving either subsidies or giving it away for free, we create a gigantic problem for ourselves by creating this crazy world in which people think of water as being something akin to sunshine or air. And it's not. It's a vast resource, but it's not a limitless resource. And that's where we get ourselves into problems. Once you put a price on it, as has been done in Israel and in a few other places around the world, once you put a price on it, people then start conserving it, and more importantly, people start innovating ways to make less use of it if they can possibly do so. So that you have innovations like in Israel inventing dual flush toilets or inventing drip irrigation. Because if you can save, 3/4 of the water on every flush, or you can save, 60, 70% of the water to evaporation with drip irrigation, then you will do that. But if water is completely free and limitless, then what the hell? Why do I need to spend money on retooling my bathroom? Or if I'm a farmer, what do I need to care about any kind of irrigation other than flood irrigation?
And that makes it almost impossible to store or prepare in times of plenty for the times of scarcity. And, just from a personal perspective, I just remember from a marketing perspective, if catalogs and brochures are readily available at no cost to all of the salespeople, guess what? They're not as well taken care of. You end up printing a lot more of that material back in the days when you did print that material. So anytime that price is artificially lowered, you're right. It's just so easy to waste. That's the natural approach that we take, and especially if it doesn't cost us very much in our pocketbook. And so it's not very environmentally friendly to keep water at a low subsidized price. But I do want to ask you a quick question after that little commentary. Is it true that in Israel, farmers and consumers all pay the same price for water?
Yeah, well, this is how it works. That farmers and regular citizens pay the same price for fresh water. Yes, that's correct.
Okay.
But farmers have access to this wonderful resource of treated water, sewage water that's been treated to an ultra-high pure level that actually is so clean that you actually could drink it if you needed to drink it. So that's it's that sewage water is the water that is a little bit lower in price. Although in the past few years, farmers have become so enamored of that lower quality water because it gives them very good results. It has baked into it a little bit of, as you know, a little bit of natural fertilizer in it, so to speak, a little bit of nitrogen in it. So what ends up happening is they end up finding themselves spending less money on fertilizer. The water is cheaper. So they really like having this water, and they like to have as much of it as they can. So that's driven the price up slightly. But in terms of fresh water, the answer is yes. Farmers and citizens in the city pay the exact same amount per gallon of water if it's fresh water.
I also heard in Israel that a lot of scientists or biologists are working with vegetables and plants that can take more salinity. And
yes, well, it's two things they do. I mean, they're doing all kinds of great stuff. First is, and this goes back to the 50s, where Israel was responding to, in the interest of time, I won't go through the whole story, but it's all in my book. But Israel developed, Israel in the last handful of decades has become one of the 5 great seed centers of the world, with the U.S., Holland, France, and Japan. Israel has added itself to that list of great countries that have enormously powerful seed industries. And that began basically with an attempt by Israeli scientists to figure out a way if they could create drought-resistant seeds. And what is a drought-resistant seed? It's a seed that basically can thrive on less water. And then I mentioned earlier this fellow who had the stroke. I mentioned earlier he was the guy who thought of drilling for water in the desert. They came up with all this brackish, very mineral-y water. So they asked the same scientists if they could breed seeds that could thrive on brackish water. And they developed a whole host of fruits and vegetables that do just fabulously on this very otherwise unusable, valueless water. And they've created this. The other thing that they've done, which is fascinating, is they say, you need to use water to grow things like roots. So what do we need long roots for? Let's develop plants with short roots. You need to use a lot of water to grow wheat with long stalks. So let's develop stalks that have, that are short. You need to use a lot of water to grow the leaves that I grow tomatoes in my backyard, and And, it seems like you get a couple of tomatoes, but it's a lot of leaves and a lot of roots, and a lot of stalk. So what the Israeli scientists did was they figured out a way. Well, none of this is GMO. All of it's natural breeding. They figured out a way to have many fewer leaves, shorter stalks, and shorter roots. And guess what? It uses enormously less water. So these are kind of the innovations that you save a little bit here, you save a little bit there. All of a sudden, you find yourself in the driest region of the world, a country that has the world's fastest growing rate of population growth, a tenfold increase in population since 1948 when Israel achieved independence, the third fastest growing economy in the world in that same time period after Singapore and South Korea. And lo and behold, they don't have a water shortage, they have an abundance of water. And that's why, a lot of people are tearing their hair out of their head thinking, oh my God, the world's coming to an end with this water scarcity we have. I'm saying we don't have to have a problem because we have a model in front of us. I'm an American, I'm not an Israeli, but we have a model in front of us that says everybody can be having something like this. Rich country, poor country, landlocked country, country along sea coast, whatever the story is, we have something we can learn from Israel, whether it's governance, whether it's getting politics out of water, whether it's pricing, whether it's the use of technology, whether it's educating our children, and so forth.
You've seen a lot of things that Israel has done with California specifically, since we're here in California. Can you kind of share that with our audience on some of the big ventures they have done and so forth?
Well, it falls into three areas, and I really want to, again, I try to always stay away from politics because I think that it tends to gum up the works with water solutions. But I do, my hat's really off to Governor Brown for having thinking that the initiative might be to reach out to Israel and see how Israel and California could partner on coming up with better water solutions. And the way the system worked out, and it's a very clever solution, is they came up with the idea of building it into three parts. The first part is government to government. The second part is academic to academic. And the third part is company to company. And so this memorandum of understanding that was entered into between the two governments, California and Israel, encourages through all kinds of different subsidies and otherwise the way for California-based institutes of higher learning and Israeli institutes of higher learning that are focused on water issues to partner together on solutions, number one. Number two is for government, local and state, to partner with Israeli entities to fix water problems, whether it's polluted aquifers or whether it's water infrastructure in municipalities, or whether it's rethinking irrigation plans. And then the third part of this is, after you have government to government and academic to academic, is encouraging business to business activity, and that's good for everybody because that stimulates employment and it grows the tax base.
Yeah.
So it's been, I would say it's been a success, and I know because I spoke recently with the governor of Colorado and the governor of Arizona, and they told me that they saw this as a model, and one's a Democrat and one's a Republican. They said they saw this as a model for their states as well.
Maybe we can all come together on water. It's a common.
Well, let's not get biblical here, but yeah, I mean, it certainly would not be a surprise if. Water, as I said earlier, water can drive us apart, but water can also bring us together.
Absolutely.
It's almost like the Jekyll and, what was that? Jekyll and Hyde. It's like within us there's good and evil. And water, it can be a source of conflict or a source of camaraderie.
It depends on if you want to be smart about it. If you have the attitude of that it's going to be about politics, you're going to be stupid about it. If you have the attitude that this is going to be about solving problems for today and tomorrow, and perhaps for the short term we have a little less today, but we know that we're going to have a much better, longer future, you can have incredible outcomes. I mean, if there's a lesson from Israel, and that the book I'm working on now is different than the Israel book, so I have a different perspective on some things. But one of the things I came away so impressed about Israel is that the Israelis have this community-focused approach. It's like, okay, everybody is selfish there, like we are here. Everybody wants what's good for them and their families, like we do here. But they also say what's good for society at large, that we can we can
for the future
everybody.
and for the future generation. I know they're always forward thinking. Well, listen, we're running out of time here, but Seth, thank you so much for your comments. Insightful as always. Keep up the great work on telling the world about water.
And you got a standing invitation when you come to California, come visit us at Toro and take a look at our irrigation stuff. So
I'd love. You have to tell me where you're located. I'll let you take me out to lunch.
We'll take it more than that. Thanks a lot, Seth. Appreciate it.
Okay, guys. It's fun. It's a lot of fun. Thank you.
Great.
Thank you.
And remember, everybody, most importantly, think blue.
KCAA Loma Linda, 1050 AM, 106.5 FM, and now 102.3 FM.
I'm getting older and noticing that my body just doesn't work as well as it used to, so I like to keep fit as possible by hitting the gym a few times a week. Recently, I started having a nagging bicep pain, and it got so bad I couldn't even lift the weights. When I was complaining about it to a friend, he told me about Angioprim. He said chelation helps remove toxins, heavy metals, and cholesterol in veins and arteries that may cause blockages. You know, after just 1 week of taking Angioprim, the pain was gone, and now I'm back in the gym full